So good morning. It is 9 a.m. here in San Rafael, just north of San Francisco, 9 a.m. Pacific time. And I'm welcoming all the participants that are always traditionally joining us from places far away. This will be an interesting webinar with a lot of useful information on how to prevent situations getting out of hand from a safety or from a fire perspective. So I welcome you all wherever you are. For today's session, I would like to introduce you to Valerian Rala, who is joining us as an expert guest, but also I want to introduce Valerian because he is here at Boot Coffee Campus, the new incoming campus director. And it will be great to introduce Valerian. Hey, Valerian, good morning. How are you, buddy?
Good morning, everyone. I'm great. I'm really curious about this presentation because, I always thought it's not important, but I learned my own lesson, as we will talk about it a bit later. So hello, everyone.
Valerian, maybe can you just give us a synopsis, a brief summary of how you got here as a human being and as a coffee specialist?
So it's all started with a fight between an American girl and me about coffee in Kosovo, where I was working for the United Nations. And in 1999, I was introduced to a totally different world of coffee through Starbucks, which is funny because obviously nowadays we don't drink Starbucks. And that kind of opened my eyes towards the coffee industry, that, hey, there's more interesting things in a coffee than just a yellow or green blends. What, as you are a fellow European, that's what we drink in Europe as a supermarket coffees, blends. So that's how it started. And in 2001, I decided just go that path, give up all my political science and diplomacy and just go that path. And started my Green Plantation European brand. It's still working very well.
And that's a roasting company also.
That's right. It's a roasting company. For the coffee nerds, we're using Probat UG22. And we use also some Turkish roasters. And of course, started my brand of coffee, online coffee education with you in, what was it, 2012, man?
We started preparing for that more than 10 years ago.
Wow.
And Valerian and I have been having this really nice collaboration, establishing this online education platform that you can find at coffeecourses.com. Just to put in some commercial here in today's webinar. And of course, today's webinar it's hosted as always every Friday at the month, the last Friday of the month by Giesen Coffee Roasters. And with the community of Giesen users and candidate Giesen users, we felt it was very important to focus on this aspect of roaster safety and fire prevention. And we will get back to Valerian to have him share some personal experiences from his many years roasting in his facility in Europe, as well as doing some of the roasting here in the US for one of his brands that he started. And as always, we also welcome questions that you can ask during this webinar. The webinar is being recorded, so can always be reviewed again, either at the Boot Coffee website, bootcoffee.com, or at the Giesen website. So let's first start discussing some important topics that relate to safety, roasting safety and fire prevention. And Valerian, maybe you can confirm that the screen that you see now is well legible, well visible?
Yeah, I see it well.
Perfect. Okay, good. So roasting safety and fire prevention. And so I think, when I was thinking about the objectives for this, oh, that was a little bit fast. When I was thinking about the objectives for today's webinar, then I thought very specifically that we should look at safety in a wide context. And so we're not just talking about safety equipment wise, but also safety, let's say, from a product liability side, safety from a personnel side. Of course, the equipment part is really key, especially when we address roasting machines. And then also, I want to take this opportunity to help you become more aware of common safety issues and how we can proactively work to prevent safety situations where the safety is at jeopardy. Here in the US, there are a number of laws, both on a state level, on a county level, as well as on a federal level, that deal with safety and product safety. And in other countries where Giesen roasting machines are installed, which is around the world, there are, of course, specific laws and regulations that are more pertinent to where you are. We can assume that safety regulations and restrictions are in the US are considered quite, I would say, quite strict for the right reasons, of course. So we want you to become familiar with some of the definitions, the concepts in safety in workplace situations, and we will go over some right and incorrect protocols. Also, we'll look at some of the safety materials, and I will go very briefly into the federal regulatory agencies to provide the international students with some perspectives on their own reality. It might be helpful if you, the audience, could share some of your own perspectives as well. And then important topic for today is the fire and maintenance protocols, specifically what protocols can be done to prevent fires. And if there is a fire, we would like to talk about, what are the best steps to deal with the situation at hand. So first, let's look at some of the basic key definitions. Obviously, when we talk about the concept of safety and when we define safety, then I looked up the definition. It's the relative freedom from danger, risk, or threat of harm, injury or loss to personnel and or property, whether caused deliberately or by accidents. And so if we look at the safety protocols that we can incorporate as roasting companies, it's all about, all possible protocols that either will help us prevent these situations or that will help us to deal with these situations once they are occurring. And I cannot stress enough that safety protocols are so key, so important, because we're dealing here also with production environments where coffee is being produced, where trained personnel is working, and we must at all times put the safety of our workers at number one. So if you, in your situation, whether you are here in the US or in Europe or in Saudi Arabia or in Australia, so if you're going to look at, what kind of safety procedures can we define, then it's really about, describing certain policies and procedures to make sure that the safety and health of your employees is always preserved. And it also should involve a workplace safety program, the identification of situations that can be hazardous and can be controlled, not only to government standards, but also to just logic thinking. And so if we apply good logic to these situations, then we can prevent situations also to get worse and to escalate. And there are kind of four key areas, four key parameters of safety. That's from a personnel perspective. We already talked briefly about this, but all these safety programs, I would say the first priority is the safety of our personnel. Then at the second level, it's also about product safety. And it's really also about keeping your products that you produce, your coffee, but it can also be the equipment that you install with the coffee. But if we very specifically look at the product safety of the coffees that you produce, is that you want to keep your products plus the clients that consume your products safe and free from harm, injury, or illness. Now, coffee by itself, roasted coffee, is not necessarily in the highest class where product safety can be an issue because of spoilage, for example. Even if coffee gets very old, besides the fact that it will start tasting nasty, it doesn't necessarily develop bacterial wild growth or fungi wild growth. But we are specifically looking here at product safety. Also, if you're producing other products than bagged roasted coffee, that can be coffee drinks, or nowadays with this new category of cold brew coffee, there's an opportunity for all kinds of bacteria and fungi, molds to occur. And this is obviously an area, this category of these new drinks where product safety protocols really need to be in place. Third category, equipment safety. And so you want to always ensure that your equipment is clean and that it's maintained well to operate safely. And then last but not least, it is worthwhile looking at the overall safety conditions in your facility, whether or not your roastery is connected to a retail store or that the roastery is kind of a warehouse, wholesale roastery. You will want to put everything in place to keep your facility clean, safe, and compliant with the local laws and compliant with, just logic thinking. Valerian, wouldn't you agree that a lot of these safety issues could be dealt with by just applying good logic thinking to how things are designed in your roastery?
Absolutely. I really loved when you addressed that this is not only about the legality of the issues. It's not only about you as a person to be legally complacent, but also about your employees. I think that point was super good because many times we think only about how to be legally compliant, but thinking about your employees, just being a nice boss or being a nice roastery owner, it's awesome.
Yep. And I'll give you another example, which is a little bit out of this box of roaster safety, but we also operate a farm in Panama. We're not roasting there, but we're producing coffee, and at coffee farms, we have a number of employees working there. And it's one of the farms we have often issues with snakes. And so we're now looking at preventative measures on how to ensure that the snakes that are effective life there, that are not going to cause unnecessary harm to our staff. And that's just one example. Doesn't really relate to roasting, but it's related to our business. So in the roasting facility, in the roasting plant, let's look at first, if you are designing a facility, let's say, this layout could be a layout of a small roastery, like a 200 square meter roastery or less. And if you're planning a smaller roastery, or if you're planning a larger factory, you always want to apply some logic sense to the design of this safety. And giving the right products or the right steps in the process its own place will help you to ensure that not only your quality parameters are being met, but also that you can apply specific protocols to the needs of those products stored or processed in your roastery. So if you follow the arrows in this flow diagram, you typically will have a shipping and receiving and loading dock, or it can be, a loading entrance of your roastery. And then you will want to think of an area where you store your green coffee beans. That storage area should meet certain requirements for safety, because green coffee bags are heavy. If they're stacked on top of each other, they could become a hazard, but they also, from a lifting perspective, there can be potential personnel hazards. And so the green coffee storage area, also from a quality perspective, should be thought of as a separate area, also to ensure that the conditions are right for the quality of the coffee beans. Then in the roasting area itself, which is, needless to say, an area where a lot of situations can happen. Think of, the temperatures at which we do roasting. Those temperatures by far exceed 150 degrees Celsius, or 200 or 300 degrees Fahrenheit. Darker roasts are done at temperatures where you are at times not far from the point where the product could incinerate spontaneously. So just think of that as a potential hazard area. But we will get more into roasting, and then any facility typically also has a lab or some cupping inspection area or a research and development area. So that area needs to be thought of in terms of safety. And then in your roasting warehouse, you will have an office with office staff, but you will also have a personnel break room for your staff that works in the warehouse where roasting and packaging takes place. And then last but not least, there's the area where packaged goods are stored and where packaging materials might be stored. These materials are often very flammable. And so applying some good logic to the layout of your facility really helps you to pinpoint the distinct requirements and needs to enable a safe roasting facility. A lot of roasting is done by Giesen users also with the smaller Giesen equipment. And this is done, let's say, even at the store level. So in roasting stores, in cafe retail stores, you have specific requirements for the safety of your clientele also. And think of, the potentially hazardous situation where a client comes in with kids, and the kids should be at all times prevented from being able to put their hands on a hot roasting machine. So all of these aspects need to be part of your own overall planning program. So when we first look at the shipping and receiving in a more, let's say, industrial setting where you can do your roasting, you can have a loading dock where trucks can hook up, or you will have a ground dock with just a ground level loading station. So the design of your shipping and receiving area, of course, determines some potential hazards. And I just want to show you from a perspective of a loading. On the left side, you can see an LTL type of delivery situation where a container shows up and now you have one single pallet with coffee. Or in the larger facilities, you can have a container that is entirely filled with coffee bags. So this process of unloading deliveries needs to be thought out as well. So when I'm looking at the safety considerations, like in this case, where a truck shows up with, a container filled with bags between, 200 to 300 bags. So what considerations are there for product safety? The container should be lined with papers to help mitigate the onset of potential moisture in the container. Green coffee is prone to to exhale a lot of moisture, and that can lead to quality issues. There's of course the hazards related to lifting, having to lift this coffee and to potentially have some accidents in that realm. The dust of coffee requires you to think of, opportunities to clean your eyes in case something goes wrong. There has to be thought of a dock gate, which helps you to prevent personnel from falling in between the dock and the actual truck that shows up. And that dock plate that facilitates the dock gate should be adjustable in this case. But you also have to think of, how do you get from the truck into your warehouse? So you will want to have a ramp that facilitates that. And you will want to have certain preventions in place for any hazards to occur. We often work in these situations with a lift truck or with a rolling cart. And obviously, needless to say, all types of things can happen. I'm thinking myself, when we established Boot Coffee Campus some years ago, that Marcus Young, our previous campus director, and I, we were unloading one of our roasting machines that arrived, and the lift gate operator of the delivery truck was not aware that these roasters are top heavy. And we found ourselves, because of one of the players, one of the actors not being prepared well, we found ourselves in a very hazardous situation where we could have had major damage on the roasting machine. We could have had injury. Fortunately, because of our knowledge, we were able to prevent that. But these situations can occur very quickly and swiftly. When it comes about procedures to inspect your deliveries, you will really want to put certain protocols in place to instruct the personnel that might bring the deliveries, but also to prepare your own personnel by telling on time the delivery company that you do or you maybe don't have a lift gate, so that the shipping company can prepare for this. So this is just one example of how deliveries of of green coffees can be planned well, rather than making this into an area of potential liability. This of course is an example here in this next photo of what can happen if safety precautions at a loading dock haven't been followed. On the right side, that poor driver of that lift truck will probably not make that mistake anymore, I hope. And also, we have to think of issues related to hurting yourself, getting on the job, injuries due to improper lifting protocols. So it is important that staff that's involved with handling of heavy materials, whether it's coffee bags or heavy boxes, that they do the right thing in terms of lifting guidelines. Here in the US, there's a very helpful guideline that you can download through this link that is displayed on this page. But again, using logic thinking and preventing situations from happening is really key here. Obviously, in the case of lift trucks, we really want to make sure that the operator is trained, certified to do this, and that there is an operator's manual for this type of equipment around. In the green coffee storage area, we have all kinds of aspects to take into considerations. So green coffee is of course very heavy. It weighs, up to 75 pounds per cubic foot. So if you have a number of bags laying around, they become automatically a hazard, whether it's held in bags or in storage silos, or whether you're using storage bins, they can always be hazards. You could see on this picture that I'm showing here, if you receive a pallet of coffee bags and you're now going to try to store these bags in an efficient way, you can see that the loading of these pallets during shipping can already start to shift in. So this is where it's important, especially if you have a warehouse, as you can see here in this picture, that these pallets are organized well and that they're not stacked too high so that things can start falling over. And I'm going to go to the next topic. For example, if you instruct and train personnel to pick and choose boxes from the warehouse, it's important to take certain steps into consideration. Using a ladder when it's better to do so, making sure that these ladders are also safe to use. And sometimes it's safer to use a movable stairs than a ladder. Here you can see some examples of this. And this is very dry stuff, but I can tell you our research has found out that half of the injuries situated around roasting and production of coffee are due to accidents related to these types of issues that I'm outlining here. And the situation on the left needs to be prevented at all times. So when your personnel is going to use a ladder, they also always need to maintain 3 points of contact on while reaching out to these higher points. In this case, in this example, this staff member is preparing for a clean out of an exhaust stack, which obviously has various opportunities for accidents to happen. And when we're talking about heavy lifting, then these manually operated lift gates on the left side can be used for loads up to 225 kilos, and then lift trucks typically are really needed with heavier loads. In the roasting area, now it gets more interesting. Now we're entering into literally a hot zone, right? And I want to address some danger areas, but then I also want to ask Valerian to share some of his own experiences. But here you're looking at a photo of a typical coffee roasting area where you have, in this case, multiple roasters, and you have a certain product flow through the roastery. So if you look at this roastery, then one of those machines is loaded manually, as you can see here. The other option would be to do a more automated loading. The benefit of automated loading, and these features or these types of loaders are available also for smaller roasting machines. Giesen sells a really nice pneumatic loader. The benefit of doing some form of automated loading is that you're not going to incur the risk that personnel can pull out their back or have other types of injury related to that activity. It's also obviously to do loading using a mechanical or automated loader prevents personnel from getting unnecessarily fatigued by this repetitive type of action, right? And this is here you look at an example of a loader that works a little bit like a vacuum cleaner. It sucks the beans from a bin into the loading hopper of the roaster itself. Or here in this example, we have an automated loading. This is a type of chain conveyor. There are various companies that make these conveyors nowadays. This is a cable V conveyor that allows you to load green coffee beans into your roasting system. Here in the case of manual loading, if you're doing that with your roasting machine, whether it's a Giesen or any other type of roasting machine, you really want to be able to see inside the hopper. You might want to also think of having a hair restraint, to wear gloves. That's a product safety aspect. And also to use safety glasses and a dust mask where there's a lot of dust development. And then there can be a noise consideration also. And in the case of automated loading options, like in this loading dock, which is connected to a pneumatic conveyor, it is important to think about these same aspects. During roasting, this is a key rule. Various companies that I know, they have I would say, they don't tolerate any of these types of stuff. So if they, like one of our clients, they have a sign in their roasting, on their roasting floor, that texting and calling during roasting is absolutely forbidden. That needs to be, I think, a golden rule, because research has shown that most fire situations happen because of the fact that the employees were distracted, they were not paying attention, and this type of activity is often the case there. And then you also want to think of product safety and helping your staff, your personnel, for example, if they're going to handle the products with their hands, that they use gloves and some form of protective gear, or that they have good procedures for cleaning their hands thoroughly. Now, when we think of the storage of roasted coffee and of green coffee, if you have movable silos like these, this can be a safety hazard, of course. And also, we have to design these silos so that they preserve the quality, the product integrity of the coffee. And then, last but not least, when we look at the facility safety, so the overall safety in your roasting warehouse, you will want to think of, having a fire extinguisher, an emergency shutoff. Good lighting really helps. Ooh, and then one more aspect is, look at this photo where we highlighted the exposed gas lines. Then the storage of flammable materials need to be organized well, away from the roasting machine. And then we will look at packaging and finishing the production line. There are many options where it comes to packaging. This can be done manually, as is the case with most smaller roasting companies, but you can also do automated packaging, of course, where a whole new chapter of safety issues and product safety issues come to hand. In this case, look at this photo. This operator could use a hair restraint. He could use some form of mask as well, given the most recent experiences with COVID. He could wear some gloves, and then he should think about, what materials should in this case, the bin that I'm using to scoop coffees with, what material should that be? And here in the US, it would require you to have either an NSF standard grade 2 polycarbonate or similar as a material for this type of product handling. And then from a packaging best practices, when the coffee is roasted and bagged and it needs to be sealed as soon as possible, the scale that you use for weighing must be certified and legal for trade so that it doesn't create variances that you're not aware of, either in your favor or not in your favor. And then in the case of manual bagging, never touch the coffee with your bare hands. That's also a golden rule here at Boot Coffee Campus, and always use a scoop of the right material to handle your products. And the same in the case of ground coffee. The coffee needs to be sealed as soon as possible. The grinder needs to be cleaned regularly. When there is some form of the inspection or the analysis of the grinds being done, you will want to think of very specific safety considerations as well. And then some best practices for packaging. First in, first out. That's about, the product that is packaged first should be used first in the distribution. You need to know your labeling laws, and you need to keep your boxes always off the ground. So those are all types of considerations when you're doing coffee, either at a smaller scale or at a larger scale production. And there are a number of situations that we would discuss with you. This specific module is part also of our roaster safety module that we always teach here at the Boot Coffee Campus. And if you are able to join us for one of our upcoming courses, whether it's here live in the campus or at one of our virtual courses that we teach regularly, then you will be able to learn about all these aspects from at a more in-depth level. So I would like to take the opportunity to focus on, here, before we go to the roasting area, here's some personal protection equipment that can be considered. Hairnets, goggles for your eyes, earplugs for the noise, masks for the safety of the staff, for dust, but also for here in this time of the pandemic, for preventing any situations from that are COVID related from getting out of hand. And then we of course always want to have the basic first aid tools ready, and personnel should be wearing gloves ideally when handling these precious coffee products. So now let's go into my favorite topic, roaster fires. And I'm going to kind of put Valerian on the spot, because there's one thing as a professional roaster, the roaster operator, it's not a nice topic to discuss, especially if you've had some of your own situations. I've had fire situations. I'll be honest, I'm confessing it here. It happens to the best, and Valerian also would like to share some of his experiences. In the meantime, I'm going to switch to my other station to discuss some more steps right at our Giesen machines. So Valerian, can I put you on the spot, and can you share us some of your experiences, please?
Yes. Well, I was a little bit nervous when Willem asked me to do this, because obviously nobody is proud of their mistakes, but they happen. But before I go to the roasters, can I have some comments about your presentation? Because I was making notes.
Please, yeah.
Awesome. Please. So some of you know that I have a coffee brand in Slovakia in Central Europe called Green Plantation, and it's a roaster operation. And I was also roasting here in the United States with a brand called Unleash Coffee, where we utilize the place called co-roasting. It's actually co-ro here in Berkeley, which taught me a lot of things. And watching Willem's presentation, I realized that we do a lot of bad things at Green Plantation. And I did have a gut feeling about it, as Willem said that, you know, you should trust your judgment, like your logic, and I did, but I didn't act on it. So one of the things what we do wrong, and I will fix it after this presentation, is definitely when it comes to dealing with coffee bags. They are 60, 70 kilos. And the truth is, we had these amazing worker. She's a bodybuilder. So she was, you know, taking these bags easily, unloading pallets, but it created a kind of macho culture that the rest of the team feels, especially the men, that they should catch up with this. And I see them many times carrying these bags very unsafely. And as a guy who is close to his 50s, and I used to be able to move these bags easily, nowadays it's much harder. So just be careful about that. Use the tools available to you. And here in Unleash Coffee, we actually resolve this with smaller bags. I was lucky enough that my business partner was a farmer. So at the farm level, we decided that we are not going to package these coffees into 60 kilo bags, but in much more manageable 30 kilo bags. So that was one of the solutions. Also at the Coro, we used to use pneumatic vacuum lifters. Oh my gosh, that changes your life. That's a really, really comfortable way to load your coffee into your roaster, especially if your roaster is like a 35 kilo, right, lowering, or in our case, a 22 kilo in Slovakia. So that really changes your life, the vacuum lifters. So what did I have? What else did I have? Yeah. When it comes to the layout of the roastery, what we did in Slovakia, we actually volunteered and went to the health inspection and said, hey guys, we are building our roastery. Can you help us? Can you advise us? Yeah, they came out. It's free because, of course, you paid from your taxes, and they will come anyways. They will come for your health inspection. So before we laid out the whole roastery, we just asked their help. It's free. And again, they will come out anyway when you're going to be done with your roastery, and they will inspect it. So these are the tips when it comes to roasting and packaging. Willem had a great point, and he kind of like just hopped over it a little bit, that use sealers which are legal. And especially in the United States, I'm sure it's everywhere the same. You can buy tons of sealers which are from China or from I don't know where, but they are not certified. They're just sealers, and they're priced so well. It's so tempting to buy them. And with Unleash Coffee, when we started, we did buy one. We almost burned down a place. So just be careful, buy sealers which are reliable, and they are certified for your power, certified for safety. That's super important. Okay, what else I did here? Yeah, Willem again showed you a mask when you package coffee. When you package ground coffee, I know many people don't, but many people do, use a mask. The coffee powder is really nasty for your lungs. So make sure that you or your employees use masks. And I know again from Slovakia, the macho culture, masks, well, not very popular before the COVID. Obviously now everybody wears masks. It was kind of weird to wear a mask before that. Wear a mask, it really, really protects you. Now, to my story of the fire. You know, when I started to roast, I had few fires, but usually I never roasted very dark. So it wasn't really a drum fire, but most of the times it was the chaff smothering, okay? So it happened, and I thought that after 20 years, I learned my lesson. You know, I roasted a lot of coffees, and it didn't happen for a long time until it did. So the story is that here at Boot Lab, we have Giesens, and we have a W6, which I use sometimes for production roasting. I was roasting our Unleashed coffee. Again, it was a partnership with a Brazilian farmer, and like all our coffee is sun-dried natural. Sun-dried natural coffee, as most of you know, comes with a lot of chaff. So what happened is that I was tired. I was roasting one day and I was supposed to roast next day, and I just wanted to go home. I have this beautiful routine with my family, 6:30 dinners. We do it for ever now. And I wanted to go for dinner, didn't want to miss it. And I didn't clean the bottom of the roaster. After a whole production day, it's a must. Okay, you have to clean it. So next day I started to roast as nothing happened because I forgot that I didn't clean the roaster before. And what happened? I got a little smoldering happening under the cooling tray in that area. And two things happen. Well, first, you're smoking your coffee in a cooling tray. So if you are not going for smoking flavors, that's not a good idea. Obviously, your lab smells horrible, or your roasting place in your case. And I wanted to mitigate this very fast. So what do you do? Well, in my case, I was like, how can I fix this, not to ruin the coffee and continue roasting, because I had a full day ahead of me. With tired head, what I decided is I'm going to vacuum it out. Now, if you know the physics of fire, fire loves oxygen, right? I mean, that's how you basically, oxygen is basic stuff for the fire. So as soon as I put my vacuum inside the cooling, under the cooling tray, that area in the Giesen roaster, I started to vacuum. Obviously, the whole vacuum was on fire. Now, luckily, I was mentally strong enough that the stress hit. And what I did, I just opened the door, took the vacuum out, and then I dealt with the roaster. So I don't know how, but even with that tired head, the steps, what you're supposed to do when it comes to preventing the fire were right. In this case, taking the source of the fire, which was, in this case, the vacuum cleaner, out, and then starting to air out that place and dealing with the roaster. I'm ashamed to say that, but after 20 years of roasting, this happened to me. So it can happen to you. That's why, you know, as Willem said, this topic might be a little bit dry, but it's super crucial to prevent situations like this. So Willem, now I said it to the whole world. Are you happy? You are muted.
Thank you for this confession, Valerian. We honor that. We appreciate that you are so honest. You know, and of course I could make all kinds of jokes about this, but the thing is, this is not a topic that we can make jokes about, because these situations can be extremely serious,
especially that it happened in your lab, right?
Yeah. And I think specifically also, Valerian, I just want to make sure when I'm talking now, do you see me in a larger screen?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Specifically, I want to address, you know, what Valerian just mentioned. You know, fire, of course, loves oxygen. That's what it needs to thrive on. And the tricky thing here is roasting machines, they also need oxygen to operate. That's why we have an airflow in a roasting machine. So, and I just want to take this camera and now talk a little bit about our beautiful W6 here that we have here, sitting next to our WPG1, our sample roaster, and there a little bit beyond is the W1A. Very specifically, I want to address kind of the fire safety protocols that are key to embrace for your W6 or for your roasting machine of whatever brand you're using, right? So one of the key ingredients for a possible roaster fire is this chaff, right? And this chaff, I'm just now giving you a glimpse here in the chaff collector. That chaff at some point will start a fire if that chaff collector is not cleaned sufficiently and consistently. And it is always interesting to see how many opportunities there are for fires, even when you think that you successfully cleaned out your roasting machine. I'm now pointing at the cooling area. Now, under this cooler, if I remove this cooling screen, most roasting machines allow you to take off the cooling compartment. You will find a lot of debris built up. So it's essential to really understand how your machine is made up, how it's assembled, to understand where chaff can develop. Here at our W6 Giesen is an area which is often overlooked by novice roasters. You can see this is an area where small chips from coffee beans that are being roasted, they fall between the crack between the faceplate and the drum. And this is where they collect. Roasting machines that do not have this type of drawer, typically this debris will assemble in your burner chamber. That's the same chamber where your flames are, right? On this Giesen W6, the burner chamber sits here above from where my finger is. So that burner chamber, you always want to make sure that you keep that clean as well, because that's usually where glowing particles of coffee chips and chaff can start traveling through your roasting system and cause some form of a fire. Then on top of that, for US regulations, UL regulations, this machine is equipped also with emergency on-off buttons, like this one here. Switches that notice when a gate is opened erroneously, which can become a fire safety hazard, like this one. And it has various of those precautions. Then let's look at the materials that this roasting machine is equipped with for a venting perspective. This is a stainless steel, fire resistant type of material. And then what do we have here? And this is an interesting piece of equipment that is being used by many Giesen users around the world. This is called a vortex. And the vortex is both a device that helps you clean your roasting exhaust, but it also helps you to prevent fires. So it's a tool that helps you to deal with your neighbors so that they don't complain about the smoke and the odors, but it also uses the power of atomized water particles to bring the temperature of the exhaust down from 300 to 400 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 150 to 200 degrees Celsius, down to within a flash of a second, down to 150 degrees Fahrenheit or less. So this is a great tool to also help you prevent fires. In addition to that, it also allows you to always keep a very clean roaster exhaust stack. And so if you're thinking of fire safety prevention, then that roaster exhaust stack, and I'll point you here to some of the other equipment that we have here. And this stack is laid out with double-walled exhaust materials. And we have, you can see the connections are so that they can be easily opened up and easily be cleaned out. And all of these types of materials have to be thought out well when you design your roastery. Valerian, did I forget anything before we get into some procedures on how to deal with fires if they would occur?
I don't think so. I think it was pretty comprehensive.
Thank you. So we've talked a little bit about fire prevention. A lot of near fire situations can be dealt with this. Exactly, with a very small sprayer with which you can spray small amounts of water into your roasting chamber if you suspect that there might be an issue. And this works very simple. Let's assume you expect that something is wrong. Smoke is protruding from your chaff collector, or there's much more smoke coming from your exhaust deck than there should be at this stage of roasting you're in. So a very simple spray with water, in this case, can be applied if you assess the situation to be as risky, can be applied here through your sampler. And a very small amount of water spraying this into your roasting drum will displace the oxygen briefly, which can then help you to put out the threat of a fire. So this simple $10 tool can help you a lot of in many ways. Now, if things get out of hand, then obviously you must have some form of a fire extinguisher. We advise two types of extinguisher. One is a foam extinguisher, which should be applied if things get out of hand. And the other should be a CO2, a liquid CO2 extinguisher, which will displace oxygen as well and cool down the situation. But obviously, you will not want to get there, right? So what are some of the right steps to consider if a fire is occurring? Then at all times, as Valerian also says, you will want to take away the root cause of the issue, which is, in many cases, you have to think of preventing any more gas flowing into your roaster. So having a gas on-off switch or valve near your machine is really helpful. And I'll show you here what we installed at our roasting machine. So we have right here, you're looking at the area where we have a gas control valve to this system. And there's a gauge as well to look at the pressure. But that yellow on-off switch is really important, that yellow valve. You will also want to think of, when you're looking at how to prevent things from getting bad, you will want to, at all times, not allow to get unnecessarily oxygen to your coffee. So let's assume you suspect there's a fire in your drum or in your chaff collector. Let's say you are at the end of your roast. The coffee is done. The coffee is ready to be released in the cooling tray. What should you do? In this case, you should not take out that coffee, because as soon as you allow the coffee that could be roasting in here, when you dump this coffee into your cooling screen, that is literally adding fuel on the fire. And there are a number of other steps that can be outlined where it comes to dealing with a fire and preventing it from escalating. And there are procedures for this that can be found through our website. You can find these procedures, and we are always there to help you in these situations. But I think, from a training perspective, it is important to define a fire prevention protocol with your staff at your work floor, in your warehouse, to have a logbook which lists when the roaster was last cleaned. So chaff, again, is a major contributor to these situations. That logbook should also list when the exhaust stack was cleaned last. Plus, your fire prevention protocol should also include what I call a fire drill, a fire exercise. So now you're going to simulate as if a fire is happening in your cooling tray, which is a really bad situation. So what steps are then necessary? So these types of drills, these exercises will help your staff to become ready if this type of mayhem is occurring. And Valerian, maybe you have some closing notes, some additional tips for our audience.
Yeah, the only tip I have is basically, even if you feel that it's never going to happen to you, it can, because that was my feeling, that after 20 years of roasting and having, you know, a few fire accidents in my beginnings, after 20 years, this is not going to happen to me, but it definitely can. So do pay attention to that for sure.
Great. I see there is a question here. We use a Giesen W50.
Unmute yourself, Willem.
Yeah, now you can hear me. Yeah, yeah. So this client uses a. You can hear me fine now, right? Valerian, you can hear me fine?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. Okay. Here's a question from a Giesen W15 user, and they have an electrostatic filter. And electrostatic filters are quite functional for cleaning out the smoke or removing excess smoke from your exhaust. And at the same time, like any other equipment connected to your roasting machine, they can become sources for fire hazards, and cleaning to prevent these filters from getting clogged is of the essence. So the question is, there's an increased risk of fire using the filters with over 100 kilo roasted coffee since they become clogged. So the best way to deal with the fire safety prevention from a filter like that is to have an extra set of filter inserts always available, so that at the end of your roasting day, the used filters can go into a soak, and then the new filters, the new inserts can be ready for action for the next day, so that you apply an extra 24 hours for soaking these filters. That's the best recommendation I can give you, next to all the other logic thinking that should be applied. This topic always leads to, yeah, I would say a lot of somewhat, unrest in the recipient's mind of this information. It's good that you now, after this session, go back to your own roasting place, your own roasting warehouse, and that you think of, what preventative measures can I take to not have these situations occur. So this hour always flies. Valerian, thank you very much for sharing your perspectives, for your honesty. And thank you all for being here. I wish you a fantastic weekend. It's a nice summer day here in California. And I wish you a successful upcoming week as well. We will see each other again on the last Friday of the next month, which is July. And until then, so long. Be well, be safe, and thank you for being here with us. Bye-bye.